Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we'll discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try to assess the decentralized solution for water crisis in the context of the new Solid Waste Management Rules 2026, which is being implemented from the 1st of April 2026. Then, in the second topic, we'll try to assess that what are the changes which has been brought by the VBGRAMG, which is going to replace the very famous MGNREGA scheme. Then, from a prelims pointer, we'll take up 5 news. We will not really try to simplify the news for you, but also provide you the much important value addition, keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2026. So, stay tuned. The Union Ministry of Environment has notified the new Solid Waste Management Rules 2026, which is being implemented from the 1st of April 2026. To promote what? To promote the 3R principle, that is, reduction, recycle, and reuse of the solid waste in our country. This increasing menace of solid waste forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of environment conservation. So today's article basically suggests that thanks to the wave of industrial revolution which started engulfing the world economy, running on the principle of capitalism as it was propounded in a very famous book called as Wealth of Nation by Adam Smith in the year of 1776 onwards, suddenly we saw the rise of various kind of large number of inorganic waste, which were basically the result of rise in the living standard thanks to the huge wave of urbanization and the anthropogenic pressure which ultimately started reducing the blue and green spaces as well as caused the huge scale deforestation and economic growth which dramatically reshaped the consumption pattern, resulting in the complex challenges for solid waste management. So the article today argues that how, before this wave of industrial revolution from the middle of the 18th century, before that, the large-scale waste which used to be present was organic in the nature and it was safely disposable waste integrated into the geochemical cycle. But thanks to this wave of industrial evolution, suddenly we see a kind of a huge resurgence of the wave of industrially manufactured goods and materials which are inert in the nature. Like for example, various kind of metals, plastic, glass, the waste which are basically composed of these products. The products which are inorganic in the nature, which basically implies that they are highly non-biodegradable. Basically meaning that they are not easily degraded or decomposed by various microorganisms such as for example bacteria, fungi, yeast, etc. For example in the case of plastic. And now with increasing urbanization, increasing number of people who are shifting to the urban areas, the increasing number of various consumer goods, we see the high scale increase in the waste which is coming from residential and commercial areas, the various electronic waste which is being generated. If you are discarding your laptop, your mobile, your tab, your television, etc. and obviously the hazardous plastic waste. So let's try to first assess the intensity of this threat by using the Central Pollution Control Board report of 2024, according to which India basically generates 1.85 lakh tons of waste daily. Of this 1.85 lakh tons of waste which is being generated on the daily basis, only 96% of them is collected. 61% is treated and 21% of this solid waste eventually either discarded in the open land or they basically are landfilled and create the landfill issue. Like for example, you guys might have heard about the famous tourist spot of the landfilling which actually exists in the region of Gazipur. So if we refer to this report, just look at the heading. India is going to generate 0.7 kg waste per person per day. So basically by the year of 2023, we are generating 0.34 kg per person per day, but now it has almost doubled in the span of just 2 years. And if we follow this trajectory, by the year of 2030, we'll end up surpassing Germany and become the 4th largest solid waste generating country in the world. Keep this in mind that out of all of this waste which is being generated, hardly 50% of that waste is eventually being treated at the source. When we have understood this, let's try to kind of segregate the waste which is being generated as per the Central Pollution Control Board segregation itself, the composition of solid waste in India. So according to the report, 51% of the total waste is biodegradable organic matter. 17% waste is actually recyclable in the nature. So we can actually apply the 3R principle here. 30 to 40% waste actually contains a large scale amount of ashes. So for example, just connect with the last lecture where we were discussing about the particulate matter 2.5 and of 10 microns, which leads to various kind of cardiovascular diseases among the humans. 3 to 6% waste actually is being generated from the paper making, and 3 to 6% of the waste actually consists of inert materials which cannot be treated easily, like for example glass, plastic, metals, etc. But with the large scale consumerist culture which we have, where we can see our time on our mobile, but we also want e-watches where we see the time here also. But because we are not satisfied by looking at our time at two places, we want a tab also, a bigger screen to look at the same time. And just see what the result of that has been. The electronic waste is on the rise. India is now one of the top 5 e-waste producer in the world. And as per the study which has been conducted by ASSOCHAM, the association for the various industries which exist in our country, India is producing 2 million tons of electronic waste. 20% of that, keep this in mind, comes from a single state, and that is Maharashtra. And when we talk about the state of Maharashtra, keep this in mind, just see the total number of recycling which they actually do. That is hardly the 10% of the waste which is being generated. Maharashtra is one of the economically sound state in our country. So if in that particular state, the total e-waste recycling is only 10% of the waste which is being generated, just imagine the scenario which might be prevailing in the underdeveloped states of our country. Then let's say, for example, in the case of plastic waste, even though it forms a very small component of the total waste which is being generated, keep this in mind that because of the fragmentation of this plastic, considering it is non-biodegradable, the fragmentation of it which is being done by the UV rays, it actually create a kind of a huge havoc, not only to the humanity, but also to the various flora and fauna. So for example, thanks to this fragmentation caused by UV rays, the plastic basically starts fragmenting down, or basically starts kind of degrading down to various microplastics whose size is less than 5 millimeter, like for example polyethylene, polypropylene, or nylon, for example. When these small microplastic actually start ingesting in our system, in our body, thanks to the inhaling or through various purposes, it basically leads to bioaccumulation. Such as, for example, just look at the impact of one such microplastic, that is bisphenol A. It can lead to cardiovascular diseases, cause infertility, actually leads to various kind of carcinogenic impact. Then when large scale of this plastic waste is not being treated, because obviously it requires huge gestation period, huge capital investment. So it's much easier and much cheaper to actually discard them in the Pacific. You guys might have heard about something called as Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So as per the Convention of Biological Diversity, such huge accumulation of microplastic and plastic which has taken place in the various sea region, it is having a negative impact on more than 660 aquatic species, where it is eventually degrading further and leading to the chemical accumulation, thus leading to various kind of neurological and hormonal imbalances among the flora and fauna which is prevailing in the region of ocean. Almost more than 1 lakh plus marine mammals actually end up dying every year. Does this various kind of solid waste management or mismanagement actually ends up threatening the biodiversity altogether? Yes. It leads to the complete alteration of the habitation structure. So for example, let's say there are various phytoplanktons which are actually found right in the epipelagic, or let's say the bathogenic regions of the ocean, right towards the bottom surfaces. So these phytoplanktons, don't you think, might be going through or kind of doing the process of photosynthesis, and as per a statement which was asked in UPSC prelims examination, they actually eventually generates more than 50% of the oxygen as well. So when they are playing such a critical role, now imagine that this upper layer of sea, surface water, actually starts filling up with the plastic waste. which ends up covering the entire sunlight or blocking it and thus completely distorting the photosynthesis process which was taking place here. Don't you think it is going to significantly impact the soil fertility as well? And with this reduced dissolved oxygen which is taking place in various such sea surface areas, or let's say various such water bodies, don't you think the biological oxygen demand as well as the chemical oxygen demand of such water surfaces are going to increase significantly higher, thus leading to what? The issue of eutrophication. These are the various challenges which is being caused by this menace of solid waste in our country. Just let's have another glance at the total numbers which we can actually quote in our answers when it comes to the plastic pollution. And for that, we are referring to the Global Plastic Outlook 2025, which has been released by OECD. According to which, in the 2 decades from 2000 to 2019, the plastic production end up doubling. In the year of 2024, 460 million tons of plastic waste was actually being generated, and total 353 million tons of waste generation was reported. 40% of that came from packaging, 12% from the various consumer goods which people use, and 11% from the textile. Keep this in mind. Only 9% of this waste generated was recycled and 19% was just incinerated, just burned. And what does this incineration of plastic leads to? Various kind of greenhouse gases. So don't you think such mismanagement of plastic or solid waste is also heavily contributing to the global warming which is taking place? 50% of this waste ends up in landfills and 22% completely evades the waste management. So as per the reports, in the year of 2024, right, as per the EA Earth Action, 220 million tons of plastic waste will be created. And just 12 countries are responsible for 60% of this mismanaged plastic waste which takes place in the world. And remember, India is one among the top 5 along with China, USA, Brazil and Mexico. The global plastic will further end up tripling by 2060, reaching to 1.2 billion tons. Thus, 50% of the world population currently is actually living in the areas where plastic waste has exceeded the managing capacity. And this total plastic waste generation accounts for almost 3.4% of the greenhouse gas emission, where we have already seen that how our country is generating approximately 1.85 lakh of solid waste every day. So what are the recourses which has actually been taken by the government of India? So keep this in mind that today's article of Text and Context in the Hindu is actually critical of these rules. So first let's try to understand the procedure which has been established by these rules in detail, and then we'll try to see the shortcomings which has been addressed by the editorial. So first, what are these solid waste management rules? Keep this in mind that they were actually framed under the provisions of an act, and that act is Environment Protection Act of 1986. And specifically under the provisions of Article 253. What is Article 253? So Article 253 actually allows the central government or union government to actually legislate on any state subject. A state subject which has been listed in the 7th schedule of the Constitution for one specific purpose, and that is to implement any international obligation. So in this case, when the government is actually creating this solid waste management rules, keep this in mind that sanitation as a subject forms the part of a state list. But even then the government is able to, kind of frame these rules and direct the state government. Why? Because Article 253 provides a special power to the central government, where currently the central government is implementing the obligations which it has under the Stockholm Declaration of 1972. So what central government said? Central government said a very simple thing. It said that waste generators must now start segregating the waste into 4 very distinct streams. What are those streams? First, wet waste, which basically consists of biodegradable kitchen waste. Then dry waste, which consists of your plastic, paper, metal, glass, etc. Then your sanitary waste, which is used diaper or sanitary pads, or your special care waste like for example paint cans, bulbs or expired medicines and batteries. Then the municipalities, or let's say the gram panchayats, they are going to basically identify the bulk waste generators which are prevailing in their areas. Now what are these bulk waste generators? They are basically the building which has a floor area of more than 20,000 meters square, or if the building or any residential area has a water consumption of more than 40,000 liter, or if the electricity generation is actually taking place of 100 kg per day waste or more, or the various kind of large scale societies, malls, colleges, hotels, or your resident welfare associations. The idea is that the government is basically going to direct these municipalities, fund these municipalities, which are basically going to create such waste processing plants near these bulk waste generators itself. So the idea is that these bulk waste generator, first and foremost, now they have an obligation that they shall segregate the waste in 4 streams. Keep this in mind. It will be actually help us to understand the issue. And they are required to segregate the waste at source and hand the recyclable materials out of this to the authorities. Then there is an imposition of polluter pay principle also, under which, let's say for example, these bulk waste generators, if they are not treating this waste, and because of that there is a kind of a huge detrimental cost which is taking place on the environment, then they are actually required to pay environmental compensation for improper waste handling. So just imagine in your mind that, okay, there is a large scale resident welfare association. In that there is a large number of houses which prevails, which has a building with floor area of more than 20,000 meters square. There, let's say for example, you ended up generating a lot of plastic waste, but first and foremost you did not segregated that waste into these 4 streams, and then without treating that waste ended up disposing them outside. Then you will be required to pay a significant amount of penalty which will be imposed upon you as per the directives of Central Pollution Control Board. Keep this in mind. To track all of this, the government is going to create a centralized portal to actually track the waste generation, collection and processing. So can we get a little bit hint or a little bit smell of further centralization of the process of solid waste management in our country? And that is exactly what the article today is actually critical of. So what we'll do? First and foremost, we'll try to understand the issues. To understand the issues, we'll also buy or borrow some theoretical framework which has been provided to us in the today's editorial itself, which will actually immensely help you to get that 1 extra mark. And then the suggestions which has been provided by the today's editorial. So first and foremost, let's try to assess what are the far-reaching power of the center under the rules. So we have already discussed and established the context of Article 253, which actually empowers the central government to legislate on a stateless subject thanks to the international obligation. In this case, Stockholm Declaration of 1972. So for example, under this Article 253, the central government can start legislating on the state subjects like, for example, water, land, sanitation, etc. In this case, the government is specifically kind of exercising this power to regulate the sanitation. So the article today says that how as a country we basically always overestimate the competence of the central government and its agency. We always undermine the sub-national capacity which exists, and thus we end up reducing the urban local bodies and state government than nothing more than the instrument application agency of the central government and its schemes, that's all. So instead of following the bottom to top approach, in most of the cases we start following the top to bottom approach, where the article basically argues that, let's say for example, you have devised such 4-step segregation system for a metropolitan city of Mumbai, where these municipalities of Mumbai, right, of BMC, they actually have the capacity to actually apply this 4-step segregation system, actually collect the waste in those 4 specific chambers, then actually provide the recyclable material, or actually kind of provide various kind of processing systems for various kind of waste. But do you think that this same model, which is suited for the metropolis Mumbai, is also applicable for the Himalayan pilgrimage town? Thus, the article first and foremost is actually critical of one-size-fit-all approach. Second, it says it actually takes the help of a kind of a book which is written by the Nobel laureate, that is F.A. Hayek. The book is called as Use of Knowledge in Society, which basically provides a system or an example of helicopter approach. What is helicopter approach? The helicopter approach basically criticizes the politicians and the bureaucrats who are sitting in their air-conditioned chambers in the Lutyens, Delhi, and they are basically framing the policies for a far distant village. The village which is basically facing the drought of which these bureaucrats and politicians have no idea about. And that is the issue where you are basically undermining the subnational capacity itself, where you are just treating these urban local bodies and municipalities as nothing but an instrument application agency, that's all. Then the editorial further states that how these Gram Panchayat, they are being pictured as a miniature municipality. That just like we have a municipality in this very developed mega city of Mumbai, this, let's say for example, a small municipality in the state of Madhya Pradesh, they also have the same capacity. But the article tells us that how they basically lack any kind of segregation waste collection vehicle itself. They actually lack adequate amount of staff. They don't have sanitation engineers, or they don't have such processing plants as you can expect in the region of Mumbai. Also, they actually lack the fiscal capacity itself to actually go for this 4-step segregation which you are actually envisaging. Then there is an issue that there does not exist any phase-wise segregation plan. Try to understand this. So the idea was that let's first implement this 4-step segregation thing to actually create these processing plants near these bulk waste generators, first in the mega cities. Let's say how they are working, what are the challenges which is being faced there. Let's take a feedback mechanism and then let's implement it in the municipalities. Then further take it to the small towns by specifically catering to their localized issues, their localized needs. That could have been one ideal step way forward. And that is exactly what has been actually suggested by the economic implication of learning, by doing a book which has been written by another Nobel laureate, that is Kenneth Arrow, where he states that how this capacity is not conferred from above. Rather, you shall create a kind of a feedback mechanism. So let's say for example, there is a district. We end up dividing that district into various blocks. So when we are creating these blocks, we end up also identifying that, okay, let's say this is a developed block and this is an underdeveloped block or UDB. So what we do? We identify such bulk waste generators in this region. Then we identify the various, let's say for example, the segregation of waste which takes place in 4 categories. Then we see how much funding is required in these developed regions first. What are the challenges which is being faced there? We take up the feedback from each and every resources which exist from the district management. And then ultimately from these learning, we start applying the very same scheme, very same initiative in this underdevelopment block as well. And for that purpose, you can also use this in your conclusion that there is a very famous judgment which was given by Justice Louis Brandeis. The judgment is called as New State Ice Corporation versus Liebman 1932, where he said very famously that how the state shall actually act as a laboratory for various kind of socio-economic experiments. And the experiments are actually safer when they are localized and close to the grievances, and the results are faster when there are multiple agencies which are kind of applying various kind of initiatives and thus creating various solutions for problems. So what are the suggestions which has been given by the editorial today? First is the principle of subsidiarity, where the government functions shall be performed first at the lowest level, create a feedback mechanism, and throughout that try to do the reforms. Second, rural local bodies shall create a material recovery facility first. Then there shall be an awareness campaign launched by Gram Sabha, and household and community composting shall be promoted. Then we can actually take the step for cluster level dry waste segregation and processing center in the near urban local bodies which is within the vicinity of various rural panchayats, municipalities, etc. So that can be a way forward. Further, what can be done? First is the inclusion of repairability factor in the design and the procurement policy. So for example, instead, let's say for example, if my mobile is hanging, if there is this repairability factor which has actually been provided to me, where I can actually provide the software update by myself, I will not, let's say, end up discarding this mobile after every 2 years. right, which is also called as a planned obsolescence by various companies. Suddenly after 2 years you will see that your mobile is actually hanging or getting slow. Second, we can actually go for social engineering, promote this principle of 3 Rs: reuse, recycle, reduce the waste, and for that purpose the government has also launched this Prakriti mascot. Then we can further provide research as well as capital investment to create future technologies where we can actually use such bacteria which has the capacity to degrade these waste, degrade plastic waste, like for example Iodonella sacchariensis. Then further public-private partnership shall be done for increasing the fund allocation to municipalities and use of various corporate social responsibility funds. Also, we can try on-site composting as well as waste to wealth plants. Keep this in mind that we can also follow the global best practices, like for example the China's Hangzhou city, which has actually shifted towards becoming a zero waste city. Or for example, how countries like Australia are taking stringent steps to actually kind of control the plastic waste accumulation which is taking place in various products. For example, in this case of Australia, where a range of single-use plastic items like straw, cutlery, microbeads in shampoo, all of them are being banned in the various states, like for example New South Wales. So keep all of these innovative suggestions in your mind, try to incorporate them in your answer, and we move forward to the next news, where the opposition has launched a scathing attack on the union government for the shortcomings that actually prevails in the central flagship scheme for the unskilled manual workers, earlier known as MGNREGA and now being rebranded as VBG-Ramji, which forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of government policies and intervention. So what is the context of the news? Sounding the final bugle on the MGNREGA, the government on Monday notified that from the 1st of July, all rules, notifications, schemes, orders and guidelines which were made under the law will stand repealed, and the Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Gramin, that is VBG-Ramji, will come into the force from the date of 1st of July. So the first question which shall come in your mind shall be that what is even the need of such a scheme which provides unskilled manual work in rural areas, that too in the year of 2026, where we shall be actually focusing upon the large scale industrialization in the rural areas. Why we are actually providing such unskilled manual work? So for that purpose, let's refer to the data which has been provided to us by the Economic Survey of 2026, according to which 65 to 66% of the India's population, that is 90 crore people, they still reside in rural India, where this agriculture and allied sectors like for example the livestock or waste to wealth generation plants, they end up providing employment to almost 55 to 60% of the rural population. 15% of this workforce in the rural area is directly engaged in agriculture, and this agriculture sector is still the largest employer in our country, providing employment to almost 46% of the total workforce as per Economic Survey of 2026. So keep this in mind that according to the World Bank, still there is a 5.3% of our country's population, that is approximately 7 crore people even today, who actually faces extreme poverty. And 2/3 of such poor people, they actually reside in the rural areas, where 60 to 70% of the rural population ends up earning less than 1 lakh rupees per annum. So if you refer to the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, the monthly income, average monthly income of the farmer is actually approximately 10,000 rupees. So they are facing various issues. They are facing the issue of climate change, the extreme global warming which is taking place, the issue of drought, the failure of monsoon thanks to, let's say for example, if El Nino condition is prevailing, or unseasonal rainfall, extreme rainfall, extreme weather events. So because of that, don't you think that if they solely rely on agriculture and allied sectors, it is actually going to become detrimental to their large scale growth prospect? And thus, don't you think it is actually much more important for them to seek an alternative job as well while they are working as a farmer, right? In the time of, let's say, non-cropping season, or for example, in the spare time of the day which they have. So this rural unemployment rate which exists 4.2% as per the periodic labor force survey, that will actually start declining. So keeping all of that in mind, the government had basically enacted this Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act of 2005, which actually provided the right to work, guaranteeing at least 100 days of legal, unskilled manual work as a guaranteed employment in a fiscal year to every rural household as per the demand. Keep this in mind. So it's basically nothing but a demand side scheme where the demand for employment is actually generated by those people who are unemployed, and thus there is not a fixed job days or criteria or specific target number by the government. Rather, more the demand is created in the rural areas, more job is being created by the government. Who is the implementing ministry? It is the Ministry of Rural Development. Keep this in mind that the Gram Panchayat, right, which has a constitutional status under the 11th schedule of the Constitution, it plays three important roles. First is, it actually identifies that, okay, these are the people who are voluntarily offering to work as a manual worker, right, unskilled worker. So they provide basically job cards after inquiry. Then they actually kind of also do the mandatory social auditing. So first and foremost, let's say, what is a manual work? Manual work can be, let's say, for example, creation of a farm pond, or for example, let's say, building roads under Gram Sadak Yojana, or for example, planting trees, right? Let's say, for example, there was a sadak which was created, road which was created. So planting trees on the side of it under the Forest Conservation Act of 2023. So these all can be considered as a manual work. So the role of Gram Panchayat or Gram Sabha is that they will actually do a mandatory social auditing, where they will go and they will say that, oh, acha, ha, on the paper, 1000 trees has been planted, and then they will count and they are like, yes, the work which exists on the paper has also been implemented on the grassroots level. Keep this in mind that under MGNREGA, specifically 0.5% of the total budget of the scheme was specifically directed towards this social auditing feature. Then 33% of the work was specifically reserved for the women. If you refer to the Ministry of Rural Development's data for the month of September 2025, more than 50% of the beneficiaries were women. So don't you think that the MGNREGA also acted as a very important pillar for the women empowerment, as it provided a kind of a financial independence to them? Then keep this in mind. Let's say, for example, I am a worker, okay, and I have applied for this scheme, right? So I say that, okay, yes, I want to work manually, unskilled work, right? And I end up applying on the date of 12th of May 2026. So let's say, if I do not get employment within 15 days of submitting my application, or if I do not get employment within 5-kilometer radius of my house, then in that case, I will also get unemployment allowance. And who will pay for this unemployment allowance? Keep this in mind, it will help you to understand the provisions of VBG Ramji, that is the state government 100% unemployment allowance, if these two conditions are not met. So it's not just a scheme, it's a step towards the rural empowerment also. So basically, can we say that, okay, it's a scheme which is being funded by the state government? No. So is it a centrally sponsored scheme? The answer is yes. Just look at the central government share under the MGNREGA. Do not learn this now, right? Because it has become obsolete. It will help us to understand the provisions of VBG Ramji. So earlier, 100% wage cost of the laborers, 100% wages for skilled and semi-skilled work, 75% of the material cost, almost 100% of the administrative expenses, all of them was actually borne by the central government. The state government was responsible for two things: 100% of unemployment allowance if the work has not been given within 15 days of the application of the submission of the application, or if the work has not been provided to me within the 5-kilometer radius of my house. Then 25% of the material cost and the cost of land acquisition on which this manual work is being implemented by the laborers. If there is a failure in the payment due to center not releasing the funds, so let's say, for example, the state government is saying that, yes, we were going to pay them the wages, but we have not been able to pay them the wages within the 15 days of the stipulated time. Why? Because the central government has not released fund. Then whatever there is a compensation cost, that is also borne by the central government earlier, right? So what were the issues which started emerging in this MGNREGA, which basically led to such stark criticism by the opposition and ultimately the reform as VBG Ramji? Let's try to understand that. So for that, let's create a hypothetical person and name that person as Desh Premi. Desh Premi, who resides in the region of Bihar. As the name of Deshpremi itself implies, this person is a very patriotic person, but unfortunately in our country, patriotism cannot lead you to have enough money in your pocket to actually pay for affordable healthcare or to actually afford a good nutritious food or good schools for your children. If we refer to the India Skill Report of 2026, according to that, 46% of the graduates in the year 2024 were actually held as unemployable. So basically they did not had enough skill set to get employed in the industries, right, which are working on the modern day technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics. As the luck would have it, Deshpremi also belongs to this category of 46% of the people. So Deshpremi basically voluntarily agrees that he wants to work manually, semi-skilled work or skilled work, unskilled work, right, at the grassroots level to earn some money for his family. The first issue which is faced by this Deshpremi is the low subsistence level payment structure. Correct? So what happens that, let's say the central government is saying that we are going to provide or bear the 100% wage cost. Take. So when the government is calculating that, they first calculate a floor wage. Floor wage is basically a kind of a minimum wage which will be paid by the central government in different states. So when the central government is actually calculating that, they refer to the Consumer Price Index Rural. Keep this in mind that what is the base year for this CPI Rural to actually calculate the wages for MGNREGA worker? The base year is 2012. That is almost 14 years before. So it's obvious that it is not basically accommodating the inflation which has taken place for the last 14 years. Thus, the wages which is being provided to the MGNREGA workers is based upon the prices of the commodities which existed back in the year of 2012. Do you think that on such wages, this Deshpremi will be able to provide good education to his children, to actually provide them nutritious food? This is also the issue which is called as hidden hunger. To prove that, let's refer here. Let's look at the figures in the daily wages, right? So MGNREGA wages notified by the center for 22-23, just have a look at that. It was 311 rupees in Kerala, 256 in Maharashtra, 210 in Jharkhand and 210 in Bihar. In comparison to that, just look at some states' minimum wages, which was 246 by the Bihar government itself. So when Deshpremi is actually working under this scheme where the floor wage is being decided by the central government, he is actually getting paid much lesser. As per the People's Action for Employment Guarantee, which actually played a very significant role in the passing of the VBG Ramji, MGNREGA wages in 17 out of 21 states were actually lower than the state's minimum wage for agriculture. But Deshpremi is saying that ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, ठीक है, हम गरीब आदमी है ना, I will survive somehow, and at least I am getting regular wages. So I will do work. Okay, I will enroll myself. Within 15 days, they will start paying me, right? They will ensure that there is some work for me. So at least I will end up providing for the sustenance of my family. Then Deshpremi is actually going to face the second issue, and that is the case of delayed payment and compensation. So what is this issue of delayed payment? Just look here, the data sheet for delayed payment. So the data which we are referring to actually provides us the state-wise details of approved and delay compensation paid and the delay compensation due to MGNREGA, and this is as up to the date of 25th of March 2025. Just look at the state of Bihar to which Deshpremi belongs to, where there were approved delay compensation. So delay compensation basically implies that if Deshpremi has been enrolled under MGNREGA and has worked, he shall get his due payment within 15 days. But if within 15 days the Deshpremi has not been paid, then he will basically from the 16th day, the workers is entitled to have a delay compensation of 0.05% per day of allowance, right? Just look at such approved delay compensation in the state of Bihar, which was approximately 1,02,178. Just look at the delay compensation which has been paid. So even though Deshpremi worked for a significant number of days and thus is entitled to a significant payment plus delay compensation, he is neither getting the payment nor the delay compensation till now, and he is just waiting to actually get his due wage. Why this is happening? Because of the tussle which is taking place between the center and the state, who are just passing the bucket of the blame. So the state government is saying that, see, anyway, who has taken the responsibility of paying this 100% wage? The central government. Central government is saying that yes, we are ready to pay the wages, but most of the time, these state governments, they are unable to find them the job, either within 15 days or let's say within the 5-kilometer radius. So this unemployment allowance shall be given by the state government. State government is saying that we have provided the employment, but the central government is not releasing their share itself. Just look at the balance which is available to them. West Bengal is saying that we have paid approximately 872 crore rupees from our pocket. There is still the payment by the central government of 712 crore rupees which they are not releasing. So they are doing what? Just passing the bucket of the blame. As per the Ministry of Rural Development, 2,550 crore worth of wages were actually paid after the mandated 15-day period in the fiscal year 24-25. And because of that, who is suffering? The people like Deshpremi. As there is much more job layoffs which is taking place in the urban areas, as the unemployment ratio is going to rise further in the rural areas, with the lack of industrialization which is taking place there, don't you think that the demand for such MGNREGA jobs or VBG job is actually going to further increase? Just look here, the work demand under MGNREGA job scheme increased by 4.2% in the May itself, right? Then the problems which they are further facing is that the government, they basically started focusing upon the concept of direct benefit transfer, following the epithet of minimum government and maximum governments. So what government said? Government said that, see, under Aadhaar Act of 2018, right, it is basically mandated that if there is any scheme which is being funded on the Consolidated Fund of India, the beneficiary of that scheme shall possess the Aadhaar card. Then the government started linking that with your permanent account number, that is PAN card, as well as your Jan Dhan accounts, the bank accounts. And thus using this jam trinity to actually focus upon the direct benefit transfer. So the money under this MGNREGA is directly transferred to your bank account or your post office account, right? Using your eKYC to actually kind of protect the siphoning of funds which was taking place because of the intermediaries. So what these intermediaries used to do, that they used to take place a kind of a symbiotic relationship between the contractor as well as the panchayat worker and district official. So let's say, for example, there is a creation of a farm pond which has to be done. So what they used to do, they used to basically complete the work within one day using the machineries like JCB. But what they used to show on the paper, that they employed, let's say, 50 workers who work for the span of 15 days. And let's say the minimum wage which is there in the region of Bihar, 240, 250, they were paid that per day. This amounts to approximately 1.5 lakh rupees. And this is one such project. So they basically used to pay this worker. They used to call them for one day, take their Aadhaar card, take their pictures and upload them on the website, the same pictures for approximately 15 days itself. And they used to basically siphon off all of this fund of 1.8 to 2 lakh rupees. What government said? Government said basically, okay, we are going to rely on technology to basically kind of curb down this corruption which is taking place. And for that purpose, the government basically brought National Mobile Monitoring Software app, where the government basically started doing real-time geotagging attendance of the worker. However, try to understand this. Let's say, for example, there is a laborer. The laborer who does not have retina, or the laborer who is basically, kind of working, right, in the field across the day and doing this manual work. Don't you think that the fingerprint of that person is actually going to change? So if you are actually going for this Aadhaar-based payment system through biometric authentication, don't you think that this person either will start facing the issue of retina mismatch or the fingerprint mismatch? Just look here. Almost 12.5% of the workers were actually considered ineligible because their biometric authentication was not being done. Then just look here, the state with the highest percentage of active workers who are ineligible under this Aadhaar-based payment system, 78% in Meghalaya, 51% in Assam and 32% in Arunachal Pradesh, where they do not even possess Aadhaar card most of the times. At the same point of time, earlier what used to happen, that let's say, for example, there is a woman living in the rural area. So she basically sent her husband to the agricultural field, and she basically end up sending her children to the school. And in between that, whatever 4 to 5 hours this woman has got, just to kind of get some extra income for her family, she basically used to go and work under MGNREGA. But now you are saying that I am going to do geotagging at a specific time in the morning and the specific time in the evening. And if you are present in between that, right, across the time period, only then you will get the payment. Otherwise, even if you have worked for 3 to 4 hours and you were not present for geotagging at the time of evening, you will be basically disqualified. So don't you think it is going to significantly hamper the care work responsibilities of the woman itself? Many of the time in the far-flung regions of these villages, there exists complete absence of the internet connectivity, and thus this biometric authentication is not done because the machine is not able to connect, leading to the issue of digital divide. The unavailability of the smartphones among these laborers to actually use the Mate app to register their attendance. Further, the government itself is following the fiscal gliding path. Look at the insufficient budget allocation and the fund crunch. 3.2% budget share was in 2021, which has significantly reduced to 1.7% in 2025. 90% of the fund was actually exhausted within the 6 months, leading to the kind of the fiscal issue which is being faced by the state governments. Further falling person days generated. 50% less person days were generated than demanded in the year of 24-25, and further delay in the completing works and the poor asset quality which obviously prevails thanks to this siphoning of funds and corruption. Taking cognizance of all of these issues, the government basically brought a new branded scheme, and that is VBG-Ramji. So first let's try to compare the provisions from the perspective of the prelims examination. In MGNREGA, it basically guarantees 100 days of employment in financial year to every rural household. Now the number of days has been increased to 125. The unemployment allowance will be paid by the state government if the work is not provided within 15 days. The issue still remains the same. The Act retains this provision. The central government provides the entire cost of wages for unskilled manual work and 75% of material cost, but now it is going to be divided with the ratio of 60:40, as it is going to be a centrally sponsored scheme. The ratio is going to be 90:10 for the Himalayan state. The state governments share administrative cost and compensation in the case of delay in the wage payment. That is still, the issue still remains the same. Now, the Gram Panchayats are going to identify the work, but 4 specific criteria or areas has been, kind of classified by the central government. Water security projects, core rural infrastructure, livelihood related infrastructure, or extreme weather mitigation work. Keep this in mind from a prelims perspective. Then the central governments will use to determine the state-wise normative allocation for each financial year. Now there is a very characteristic feature which has been included in VBG-Ramji. It says that the state government will announce in advance a period of up to 60 days for every financial year, that is 2 months, during which work under the scheme will not be undertaken. So if there is a cropping cycle which is taking place or a large scale harvesting season is taking place, so in that time period there can be a kind of a stall which can be imposed by the state government. Then it also constitutes the national level steering committee which provides high level oversight. The similar features which remains in both of them, and thus the issue also remains, that is biometric authentication, geospatial technology for planning and monitoring, mobile application based dashboard for real time tracking. So all these issues which we discuss, they are obviously going to remain exactly the same in VBG-Ramji as well. Further, mandatory appointment letters, free health checkup for worker aged 40 years and above, equal work, equal pay and equal opportunity provisions for women, creation of national reskilling funds for workers, as well as weekly working hour cap of 48 hours, right? So that is approximately 8 hours for 6 days, and mandatory overtime payments has been given as well. But what can be the ideal way forward, the reforms which can end up revitalizing the rural sector? For that, we can take up the help of Amarjeet Sinha Committee of 2023, which actually suggested for a flexible funding model, where it said that, let's say for example, we can actually integrate artificial intelligence and machine learning, and we can identify that, let's say in this specific state, these are some districts where there is actually a high scale demand of MGNREGA jobs or VBG-Ramji jobs. Then we can also further kind of decentralize it to actually identify the specific months where these large scale job demand is actually being raised. Let's say for example in the region of Maharashtra, Marathwada, if there is a drought taking place, so it's obvious that the farmers will start asking for more MGNREGA jobs. What if we actually create a tranche based fund method where in such areas for such a specific month there is already an advance fund which has been issued by the central government, release of funds in tranches based on demand. Then let's say, for example, we know that we are going to create a farm pond using this MGNREGA. So this is going to be the job one. Then we start thinking that, okay, this is a drought prone area of Marathwada. What if we create a kind of a pipeline, right? Or let's say dug a canal from this farm pond to the farm of the any farmer, or the land of the farmer, right? So this can actually, this creation of pipeline can be job 2. Then across this farm, what if we start doing afforestation, planting trees? That can be job 3, and this is called as rich to valley approach. Cluster of interlink works can be created. For that purpose, we can also link with Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana and Jal Jeevan Mission also. Then we can follow the global best practices, like for example, the block development model under the PNPM program of Indonesia, where what they did, they specifically identifies the underdevelopment blocks in a specific district. In that reason, they started providing funds to the local bodies there. Then they said that, see, these are the specific works, just like how our government has also identified. So these are the specific works. We will give you fund for this, let's say to create water security projects. You create certain projects. Then we will actually try to assess that whether those projects has actually been, kind of working on the grassroots level or not. If yes, then further funds will be released for the various other projects. A very good example. Second, we shall focus on the skilling of rural area under the Productivity Safety Net program of Ethiopia. And ultimately, yes, the use of technology for transparency and digital payments, like for example, the Bolsa Familia of Brazil, which you people can actually use in your way forward. And try to implement all of this in attempting this question, and we move forward to the next news, where there are certain important calls which has been made by our Prime Minister to the nation yesterday. What is the context of the news? So with no signs of an immediate end to the conflict in the West Asia, the Prime Minister argued the government and the private offices to actually revert to the COVID era habits, such as, for example, work from home and virtual meetings, and also asked the citizens to opt for carpooling and reduce the fuel consumption. So these are the nation first 7 most important appeals which has been made by the Prime Minister to all of you. First, prioritize the work from home. Anyway, being a UPSC aspirant, this is the thing which you people are anyway following. Avoid buying gold for 1 year. Tell to your parents. Reduce petrol and diesel consumption, and for that purpose use metro and public transport. Cut down the use of cooking oil. Good time to actually reduce down your weight. Reduce dependence on chemical fertilizers and move towards natural farming, because keep this in mind, which is the largest fertilizer which we use in our country, that is urea. Urea's price is also subsidized by the government, and thus our farmers actually heavily rely on urea. Keep this in mind that we are also more than 90% import reliant for our urea need. Then to use fewer foreign branded products and adopt the Swadeshi, right? Read Swadeshi movement for this year's prelims paper, and avoid the foreign travel for 1 year. So let's try to understand this chronology first. Why all of this directive has been given by our Prime Minister? First, if we look at our forex reserves, right, the forex reserve which is actually kept by the Reserve Bank of India to actually act as a kind of a hedge. So let's say, for example, if we are buying oil, right, from other countries and being majorly import reliant, so for that purpose, let's say we basically require the foreign currency, and that can be dollar. What if the Indian companies, the PSUs, they don't have enough dollars? In that case, what we'll do? So then in that case, we'll use the forex reserves, which is actually held by the Reserve Bank of India, where under the provisions of RBI Act of 1934, it basically acts as the bank of last resort or bankers of bank. But now these foreign reserves, keep this in mind, actually plummeted by $38 billion in the span of 2 months to $691 billion in April 2026. Why? There are several reasons. First, the sustained capital outflows from the various foreign institutional investors who have started withdrawing their money from India. Why? Because of the heightened global uncertainty. The global uncertainty which has actually been caused because of the Iran-Israel war. So the moment Iran-Israel war took place, Iran, to basically kind of create geopolitical pressure on both Israel as well as USA, it basically started creating various kind of trade blockades in the region of Strait of Hormuz. Keep this in mind, the Strait of Hormuz is considered as the oxygen pipe for our nation, which the strait actually leads to 45% of our crude oil supply, 60% of our natural gas and 60% of our LPG. So let's say, for example, we are almost 85 to 90% import dependent for all the LPG needs which we have. If you are not going to get LPG, don't you think that the prices of cylinder, they are actually going to skyrocket? And in that case, in that shortage, there can take place hyperinflation, and that's why our Prime Minister is saying that just cut down the use of cooking oil. Then, as per the Indian Express, India is currently imports 88.6% of its total crude oil need. 45% of that which comes from the Strait of Hormuz. And thus, because of the trade blockade which has taken place, the prices of this crude oil, just see, being $70 per barrel actually increased to $113 per barrel in the span of a year. And every such $10 rise in the price per barrel will eventually lead to $13 to $14 billion increase in our import bill. So we are basically keep on paying more and more dollar for the same amount of oil, thanks to the inflation which has taken place. This issue is called as imported inflation. Dollar flows out, the Indian rupee weakens. Just look at the heading from yesterday. Rupee crashes 82 paise to actually close at all-time low of 95 against the US dollar. So what is going to be the significant impact of this? So in the backdrop of this, let's say for again, the rupee has fallen. So let's say earlier if we were actually importing gold, we were paying let's say 100 rupees. But because in comparison to the dollar, if our currency has depreciated, don't you think that to actually purchase the same amount of gold, we are now required to pay more and more dollar? Thus our currency is actually going to depreciate further and further. That is going to be the issue. That's why our Prime Minister is very specifically saying that avoid buying gold for 1 year. Cut the gold purchase. Why? Because our country is the world's 5th largest importer of the gold, and we again in the context of gold we import 90% of our requirement. So India is the world's 2nd largest gold consumer after China. Keep this in mind that the gold import rose 24% to a record $72 billion in the year of 25-26. As the rupee is going to further weaken, don't you think that the consumer is going to pay the more rupees for the same gold or more dollar, leading to the further depreciation of the currency? Further depreciation of the currency, we are going to pay more dollar for the import of this crude oil as well. Thus, we are basically kind of eyeing the same balance of payment crisis which we were facing at one point of time in the year of 1991. Also keep this in mind that such large scale gold is also purchased by the Reserve Bank of India, which actually uses this gold as an inflation shield. So currently the 100% of forex reserves which we have, which basically consist of various government securities, the various other kind of investments which has been made by the Reserve Bank of India, your kind of SDR which we take from IMF, all of that. 16% of our country's total forex reserves actually consist of gold. So the gold which has been accumulated by RBI is approximately 880 tons as of March 2026. Just see USA, which has almost 10 times gold reserves than our country, 10 times more. So one major reason for this large scale purchase of gold, right, has also been that we are actually kind of importing that for the various wedding purposes, various other reasons, also acting as a kind of a security for us, right, to keep our money, where it is actually considered as a kind of a tangible asset. But the government is actually trying to liquidate this gold which has been held by you, and for that purpose the government has bought a gold monetization scheme, where it is being implemented by the Department of Economic Affairs under the Ministry of Finance, who can actually purchase this gold monetization scheme or bond, individuals, trust, institutions. So they can basically end up depositing the unused gold and earn interest on the quantity of the gold deposited. So if you are keeping your gold with the government, right, under the Department of Economic Affairs for let's say a long tenure of 10 to 12 years, then in that case you are basically going to get 2.5% return per annum on the cost of the gold which has been submitted by you. Keep this in mind that such gold which you are actually accumulating with the government, it is completely exempted from capital gain tax as well as wealth tax, and thus reducing the dependence on the imported gold. Then there is a scheme which has actually led to large scale foreign travel actually, and that is the liberalized remittances scheme, where as per the Reserve Bank of India, it can actually be availed by only Indian resident to remit the money abroad for current and capital account transaction. The limit is up to $250,000 per financial year, and you can actually remit this amount and use it for foreign education, medical treatment and travel expenses. Right? So don't you think this liberalized remittances scheme is actually fueling much more foreign travel from our country? You can also use the same for investments in foreign shares and property. Keep this in mind, it can be used by only individual Indian residents and cannot be used by corporates, your high earning funds, trust, no, they cannot. This liberalized remittances scheme is actually regulated under which act? Foreign Exchange Management Act. Keep this in mind. Just look at the Indian spendings, which is actually big on foreign tours. The spending on foreign travel has increased 5 times in the last 5 years. Just look here. So again, do we need to bring some reforms, some stringent measures in LRS? Yes. Do we need to further promote our gold monetization scheme to liquidate the gold which is held by the people, right? And kind of provide them a interest rate on that? Yes. So keep these issues in your mind, right? Very important from your perspective of your prelims as well as mains examination, and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to specifically focus upon the architecture of Chalukyas. The Chalukyas, who were ruling the region of Saurashtra at one point of a time and ended up creating a temple which is called as Somnath temple. So the Chalukyas, who ruled from the year of 940 to 1244 C and had their capital at Prabhaspatan or Anhilwara. So if we refer to the Shiv Puran, there are considered to be 12 Jyotirlings of Shiv, right, which is also upheld by the Nayanmar saint. The Nayanmar saints, the 63 saints who used to worship Shiva, right? Can anybody tell me who was the one female saint among the Nayanmars? Also, they have this very specific text which you guys might be aware about, called as Tevaram or Thirumurai, right? Very dear to them, the Nayanmars. So the story goes that you guys might have heard that when the Samudra Manthan took place, right, and the Devs who were doing the Samudra Manthan, right, they were actually expecting nectar or Amrit to come out from the Kheer Sagar. But as the luck would have it, before Amrit or nectar, the thing which emerged was actually your halahal, right, or the poison, which could have engulfed the entire world. So all these devas, they basically ran to Shivji, and Shivji basically ended up drinking that halahal or the poison, right? And that's how he became the Neelkant. But after consuming that, for a moment, he felt a bit dizzy. So he actually tried to put his step. So if we draw a straight line from the Antarctic Ocean and we draw a straight line, right, the first land which you will come across will eventually be the Somnath in Gujarat. So that's where the first step of Shivji was put, leading to the creation of the first Jyotirling of Shiv, which is also mentioned in your Mahabharata and Bhagavad Puran. Here, a temple was commissioned for the first time by the Gurjara Pratihara king, the Pratiharas who were, indulged in the tripartite struggle of Kannauj, the Pratiharas, the Palas, right, the Rashtrakutas. So that Gurjara Pratihara king, Nagbhat II, actually commissioned the Somnath temple. However, it was eventually completed by the Solanki king, the Chalukyas of the region of Gujarat, Moolraj, in the year of 997 C. Take it. As the luck would have it, our country was already facing the invasion from the northwest side, right? So after the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632, there were 4 caliphates which emerged in the region of Arabia: Rashidun, Umayyad, Abbasid and Fatimid. From this Caliphate Umayyad itself, there was an Arab general Muhammad bin Qasim who invaded the Sindh in the region of 711 and defeated the Raja Dahir, and there was a resistance of Rani Bai who eventually committed Johar in that region. Then from this Abbasid Caliphate, there emerged the Samanids who started the ruling the region of the eastern Iran, that is called as Khurasan and Iranian provinces. From where there emerged the Ghaznavids from the region of Afghanistan. The Ghaznavids who started invading the region, trying to cross the Hindu Kush mountain. The Hindu Kush mountain at that point of a time was actually being protected by a dynasty called as Hindu Shahi dynasty, which ruled from 843 to 1026 C with their capital as Udband or Vahind, right?
Such Hindu Shahi ruler was the Jaipal, who actually was defeated by the Sabuktagin. Sabuktagin in the year of 986 CE. It was Sabuktagin's successor. The name of the person was Mahmud of Ghazni, who led 17 expeditions, which has been kind of depicted in two important books. One is Shahnama by Firdausi and one is Tahqiq-e-Hind written by Al-Biruni. You need to remember two important battles for Mahmud of Ghazni. First is Battle of Peshawar, where he ended up defeating Jaipal, and thus he ended up conquering the territory till the region of west of Jhelum. And the second is Battle of Uch, in which he defended the Anandpal and thus came till the region of Chenab, from where now he launched various attacks on the Gangetic Delta and thus kind of attacking the Somnath temple and destroying the ling, becoming the But Shikan or the destroyer of the images, Mahmud of Ghazni. Who rebuilt the Somnath temple, right? That was Chalukya ruler Kumarpal. And in the post-independence India, on the order of Deputy PM, that was Sardar Patel, on the request which was done by Mahatma Gandhi, the reconstruction of Somnath temple started. And when it was created, right, to its entire glory, the Pran Pratishtha ceremony which took place on 1951 was also attended by Rajendra Prasad. So our Prime Minister, when he was addressing a gathering at the Somnath Amrut Mahotsav, which basically marks the 75 years of the inauguration of the restored temple dedicated to Lord Shiv, he said that the forces in the country continue to prioritize appeasement politics over the national self-respect, and also drew the parallels to the 1998 Pokhram nuclear test, asserting that no power in the world can make India bow or succumb under pressure. In the context of Al-Biruni, remember that he was basically the political counselor of Khwarizm Shah, who was defeated by Mahmud Ghazni. He actually, kind of had gained prominence at that point of a time as Munajim or astrologer cum astronomer. Considered to be the first Indologist who read extensively the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads and Purans. Translated the Mahabhashya of Patanjali into Arabic and Euclid's geometry into Sanskrit. You guys can see the Somnath temple in 1869 and ultimately restored to its glory in the year of 1951. The Pran Pratishtha, which was attended at that point of a time, the first president, and that was Rajendra Prasad and not Radha Krishnan. This is your entire Chalukyas of Solanki, right? The Solanki architecture. Remember one very important king, and that is Bhim I. Bhim I, who also created your Modhera Sun temple on the bank of Pushpavati river, as well as it was basically the queen of Bhim Dev, who Rani Udaymati, who created this Rani Ki Vav. On which river? On the bank of Saraswati river. Just keep this particular thing in your mind. So you guys can actually see the Modhera Sun temple, which has a very classical feature of Gudha Mandapa and Sabha Mandapa, right? As well as the Bawali, also called as Rani Ki Vav. Okay? Remember all of these facts, and we move forward to the next news, in which the article today talks about the Nari Shakti Adhiniyam, which has actually been enacted and has been also featured in one of your PYQs. The Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam and the legislative moves now associated with it ask India, who gets to sit in the rooms where the country makes its most consequential decision? The proposal is simple. Reserve 1/3 of the seats in Lok Sabha and state assemblies for women. This is a structural intervention in a political order that has treated male dominance as natural. Women from nearly half of the population, yet they have hovered around 14% in the Lok Sabha with even weaker representation in many states. They largely remain outside the institutions that decide on labor, violence, health, land, welfare, economic policies, etc. And these were the same issues which were being raised at one point of a time by leaders like, for example, your Sarla Devi Chaudharani, who was creating Bharat Istri Mahamandal, right? Or, for example, your Pandita Ramabai, who was creating Mahila Arya Samaj. And thanks to the education which were departed to them under the Charles Wood Dispatch of 1854 and a large-scale education exercise which was done by various such women like Sarla Devi Chaudharani, Pandita Ramabai, you guys might have heard about Kadambini Ganguly, right? Who became the first woman to also address at that point of time the session of Congress. The session was the 1896, right? Also the very first session where your Vande Mataram was sang for the first time. If anybody can comment down who was the president of Congress in this 1896 session. So thanks to their efforts and thanks to this political mobilization of the women, the Government of India Act 1919 for the first time allowed that yes, indeed, the woman can also be an elector and can also be chosen as a candidate, but actually left it to the provincial assemblies to provide such candidature to the women. Who was the first assembly to actually do that? That was the Assembly of Madras. And thus, the first woman to run for Legislative Council was Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, and the first woman legislator who got elected in the Legislative Assembly was your Muthu Lakshmi Reddy, right? Also, when we talk about the political inclusion of the women, we can refer to the Global Gender Gap Index 2025, which is released by the World Economic Forum, where India has ranked 131st out of 148, in which, as per the labor force participation, there is 45% participation by the women. In educational attainment, 97% of the gender gap has been closed. If we refer to the female representation in the parliament, it has actually been reduced to 13.8% in 2025, and the share of women in the ministerial role has also been reduced from 6.5% to 5.6% in 2025. Just look here. If we refer to the percentage of elected women, 46% of the women in Sweden, 45% in South Africa, 38% in Australia, right? Many of them, they do not have a specific reserved quota in the parliament, but they have a specific system of quota in political parties. In US, despite not having a quota in parliament nor in political parties, 29% of the total legislative members are elected women. Such elected, kind of reserved quota in parliament is also provided in the countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh. And these are the specific features of Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, which has been included from 106th Constitutional Amendment Act, which basically ends up reserving 1/3 of seats for women in Lok Sabha, state legislative assemblies and UT of Delhi, which also applies to the seat reserved for the SC and the ST women within the SC/ST quota. It will be implemented in effect after the census conducted, after the commencement of the bill, right? And thus not from the 18th Lok Sabha, correct? So we can very easily remove the first statement and get to the answer. Based on census, delimitation will be undertaken to reserve the seats for women. Reservation will be provided for 15 years after it comes into the effect, and seats reserved will be rotated after each delimitation as determined by the parliament. So keep these specific provisions in your mind. It can actually help you to solving some questions in the prelims examination, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll specifically try to assess the steps which has been taken by the judiciary to further faster the process of adjudication. What is the context of the news? The Chief Justice of India announced in open court the launch of a major digital initiative, that is One Case, One Data, to integrate the judicial administration at every level, from Taluk court to the top court, into a unified system. The CGI said that the mechanism is aimed at creating a more comprehensive and interconnected digital database across the courts. So what is this One Case, One Data? It is basically going to act as a digital judicial data integration initiative to create a single digital identity for every court case, where each case will be assigned a unique identification number, thus preventing the duplication of cases. And thus it will connect the data from Supreme Court to High Court to district courts to a lower Taluk court as well. Another follow-up prelims question which can be asked by UPSC. The district court in our country under the British rule was introduced for the first time under which of the following Governor General? Was it Warren Hastings? Was it Lord Cornwallis? Was it Wellesley, or was it William Bentinck? Please comment down in the box. Also, the litigants and lawyers and the judges, they can actually end up tracking the progress of the cases across the stages. For which purpose? There is also a Su Sahay chatbot, which is nothing but the artificial intelligence powered assistance chatbot, which has been launched by the Supreme Court of India and developed by the National Informatics Center to provide guidance and support in the cases to litigants and the case user, where the litigants and the case users, they can actually obtain front-end guidance regarding the filing procedure, services, case-related queries, etc. Why all of this is important? Because just look at the pendency of the cases which is prevailing in the courts. More than 68,000 cases in Supreme Court, more than 44,39,000 civil cases in high courts, and more than approximately 1,10,57,000 cases in district and subordinate courts. That is the amount of the cases which are pending, civil and criminal cases. Also, just look at the adjudication process. The cases which were actually resolved within 1 year, 67% of civil cases in Supreme Court. There are still 12% of such cases which actually took more than 5 years. 17% of such cases in high courts and almost 20% of such cases in district and subordinate courts. Keep this in mind, I am only referring to the civil cases data and I am not even counting the criminal cases data. Okay. For that purpose, the Supreme Court has also brought various such other initiatives like e-court mission project for the digitization of court records and judicial processes to enable e-filing, virtual hearings, online case status, digital orders. National Judicial Data Grid, a real-time database of pending and disposed cases, as you guys can see here. Then alternative dispute resolution mechanism, where we are trying to promote arbitration and mediation through Lok Adalats and fast track courts, right? As we were discussing in the case of the Right of People with Disabilities Act 2016, they have their own fast track courts. Also creation of various virtual courts, like for example, expansion of online hearing and digital producing, reduce delays which are caused by the physical appearance requirement. So keep these things in your mind and we move forward to the last news of the day, where we'll read about a very important organization, and that is BRICS. What is the context? So the Iranian foreign minister will travel to New Delhi this week to attend the BRICS foreign ministers meeting, which will take place on 14th and 15th of May, and is expected to call upon our honorable prime minister before the latter's visit to UAE, right? So Mr. Argachi, who is going to arrive on Wednesday, is expected to meet the Prime Minister in a joint call on along with other BRICS ministers from Brazil, Russia, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia and Indonesia. Keep the countries in your mind, right? So when was the BRICS formed? It is basically an informal grouping, right, which was basically suggested as a kind of a grouping of the developing nations who were transitioning and transforming to become the developed nations, as the idea which has been set by the Viksit Bharat of 2047 or the China's plan to become a developed nation by 2049. So it was basically in the year of 2009 when the first BRICS summit was actually held in Russia. In 2011, South Africa joined and thus the acronym became your BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. BRICS operates by consensus and its significance extends beyond the economic cooperation. Remember, these original 5 nations are also the part of the G20 grouping, the bloc which was established as a counterbalance to the prevailing world order dominated by the US and its Western allies. Spearheaded by Russia, it basically ended up envisioning an informal club rather than a former multilateral organization, thus setting it apart from the United Nations or World Bank, etc. So that's why BRICS does not have any specific headquarter, keep this in mind. However, there is a very specific BRICS New Development Bank which takes place. So this BRICS New Development Bank has its headquarters in the region called as Shanghai. Just see here, the total population which it holds, almost 3.2 billion people, 41% of the world's population, a combined GDP of more than 56 trillion, that is more than 30% of the global GDP, and thus controls more than 80% of the global trade. If we refer to the numbers, it's very obvious that these 5 original countries, you guys will be very easily remembering. Then keep this in mind, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and UAE, they basically joined in the year of 2024. Indonesia joined in the year of 2025. However, Argentina was supposed to join, but it basically refrained from joining ultimately thanks to the pressure created by USA. So just keep these facts in mind that the original 11 countries, so BRICS you guys can very easily remember. Then we can remember the Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and UAE, right? The countries which joined in 2024. The Indonesia became the part in 2025 and these forms the 11 countries. Does it have a very specific headquarter? The answer is no. And New Development Bank, which is the part of the BRICS, has a headquarter and that lies in the region of Shanghai, which has funded 98 projects, providing $32 billion to the date. Keep all of these things in your mind. The first BRICS summit took place where? In South Africa, and the BRICS summit actually took place in Russia. Take. With this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.